The night was quiet in the little diner at the edge of the galaxy. Neon lights glowed above the glass door, and the hum of strange ships came from the landing docks outside. Inside, the smell of fried food mixed with alien spices filled the air. A young human waitress wiped the counter with tired hands, waiting for the next customer. She never expected that tonight would be different. She never expected to see someone who could change her life forever. The door opened and cold air rushed in. All the chatter in the diner stopped. The other aliens turned their heads and froze. Even the music from the jukebox seemed too loud for that moment. The waitress lifted her eyes and almost dropped the glass she was holding. A tall figure entered, his body covered with black scales that shimmered like armor. His eyes burned with golden fire and his wings folded tightly behind his back. He was no ordinary traveler. He was the Dragon Emperor, ruler of one of the most feared empires in the galaxy. Behind him walked guards in silver armor, their claws gripping spears that glowed with heat. And in the Emperor's arms, wrapped in a robe of dark silk, was something small, something fragile. It was a baby dragon. The child's scales were soft, pale, and its tiny wings trembled as if too weak to open. The little dragon whimpered softly, its breathing rough, almost broken. The sight was strange. Dragons were known to be proud and powerful, yet here was the heir of the Emperor, weak and struggling to breathe. The customers whispered among themselves. Some lowered their heads in respect. Others smirked behind their hands. A few dared to whisper cruel things. "The heir is weak," someone murmured. "Unfit for the throne," another hissed. The Emperor's eyes flashed and silence fell again. No one dared to speak louder than a whisper in his presence. His face was calm, but his jaw was tight, as if he had heard every word. The waitress tried not to stare, but her heart beat faster. She had seen many strange creatures come to the diner, but never the Emperor himself. She could feel the weight of his power filling the room like heavy smoke. Slowly, the Emperor walked to a table in the corner. His guards surrounded him like walls of steel. He sat down, still holding the child close to his chest. The baby dragon whimpered again, its tiny chest rising and falling with painful effort. The waitress swallowed hard and took her pad to the table. Her hand shook as she stood before the Emperor. "What would you like to order, sir?" she asked in a low voice. The Emperor did not answer right away. His golden eyes studied her as if he was searching her soul. Finally, he gave a small nod, and one of the guards spoke instead. The order was simple, but the voice of the guard was sharp, as if daring her to make a mistake. She wrote it quickly and rushed back to the kitchen, but her eyes kept drifting toward the baby. Something inside her stirred. She saw the child struggle to breathe, its claws weakly gripping the Emperor's robe. Her chest tightened. It did not matter that this was the child of a powerful ruler. To her it was just a baby in pain. Minutes passed. Food was served. The Emperor ate silently, but his child grew restless. The tiny dragon let out a sharp cry loud enough to make everyone turn their heads. The cry turned into a painful wheeze. The Emperor frowned, rocking the child gently, but nothing helped. The baby cried louder, gasping for air. Its eyes turned glassy with tears, and its tiny body shook. The diner filled with whispers again. Some looked away in discomfort. Others smirked, cruel amusement in their eyes. No one dared to approach. No one dared to help. The law was clear. Royal blood must not be touched by common hands. To touch the child of the Emperor without permission was death. The waitress stood behind the counter, her nails digging into her palm. She told herself to stay still. She told herself not to move. But the sound of that baby's cry tore through her chest like a knife. Without thinking, her legs carried her forward. Her heart thundered in her ears. She pushed past the guards before they could stop her, and in one smooth motion she leaned down and gently picked up the baby dragon from the Emperor's arms. Gasps filled the diner. Time seemed to freeze. The guards raised their weapons, their spears glowing with heat. One more step and she would be ashes on the floor. But the Emperor lifted his hand, stopping them. His eyes narrowed, watching her with a gaze sharp as blades. He said nothing. He only watched. The waitress held the baby close to her chest, rocking it gently the way she had seen mothers do back on Earth. She whispered softly, her voice low and calm. "Shh, it's okay, little one. You're safe, breathe, just breathe." The baby whimpered again, then slowly its cries softened. Its tiny claws gripped her apron, and for the first time that night it took a deeper breath. The shaking in its chest eased just a little. The diner was silent. No one dared to move, no one dared to speak. All eyes were on the human waitress who had broken the most sacred law in the galaxy. She looked down at the baby in her arms, tears in her eyes, and forgot that death might be waiting for her. She only saw a child who needed her, and in the shadows of the table the Dragon Emperor's golden eyes gleamed, not with anger, but with something else. Something no one had seen in him for a very long time. The diner was still frozen in silence. The human waitress stood holding the baby dragon against her chest. The little creature's cries had grown softer, its body warm and trembling in her arms. For a moment it felt like time itself had stopped. Then, as if a dam had broken, voices began to rise. Quiet at first, then louder. She touched him, someone whispered in disbelief. She broke the law, another hissed. Every alien eye in the room glowed with fear and excitement. Some looked at the girl as if she was already a ghost, dead before she even realized it. Others leaned closer to see the Emperor's reaction, their faces filled with cruel delight. To them, this was not just a crime. It was entertainment. The waitress's heart pounded. She could hear the words bouncing around the diner. Forbidden, punishment, death. She swallowed, but her arms did not move away from the baby. She felt the tiny chest rise and fall, struggling but calmer than before. She couldn't put him down, not yet. Not while he needed her. The guards were the first to move. Their spears hummed with fire, their sharp claws scraping against their armor as they stepped forward. Their eyes blazed with fury. One of them growled, "By the sacred law, she must be executed." His voice echoed like thunder. The waitress flinched, her legs shaking. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but she couldn't. Her body refused. She only held the baby tighter, rocking him gently, whispering soft words. But before the guards could strike, the Emperor lifted his hand again. Instantly they froze. Their spears lowered, but their anger did not fade. They waited, breathing heavy, their eyes burning holes into the human. All attention turned to the Emperor. His face was unreadable, carved from stone. His golden eyes burned as they locked onto the waitress. He said nothing. He only watched her, the silence heavier than any weapon. The whispers in the diner grew. "Why doesn't he kill her?" one alien muttered. "The Emperor never forgives insult." "She is only human," another scoffed. "Her life is less than ash. Why does he wait?" The waitress felt their words like knives in her back. She knew they were right. Humans were not powerful in this galaxy. They were weak, scattered, often ignored by greater species. And now she had done the unthinkable, broken the law of royal blood. Death was certain, but even as her mind screamed this truth, her arms did not let go. She looked down at the baby, who pressed its small face against her apron, sighing weakly. The Emperor leaned back slowly in his chair. His voice, when it finally came, was deep and sharp, carrying the weight of galaxies. "Do you know what you have done?" The waitress's throat was dry. Her lips trembled, but she forced out a whisper. I helped a baby." The Emperor's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something unreadable passing through them. The crowd gasped at her answer. It was foolish, reckless. No one spoke so plainly to the Dragon Emperor and lived. One of the guards snarled, stepping closer. "She mocks you, my Emperor. Let me burn her where she stands." The Emperor did not move his eyes from the girl. His voice was quiet, yet it silenced the whole room. Not yet. The whispers grew louder. Confusion, suspicion, fear. "Not yet," the aliens muttered. "Why protect her? Why delay?" The waitress felt her knees weaken. Sweat slid down her neck. She could not tell if the Emperor's words meant mercy or a slower punishment. His gaze pierced her like fire, as if he was searching her heart for answers. She wanted to look away, but she couldn't. Something in those golden eyes held her in place. Then the baby dragon let out a small cough, a spark of smoke escaping its mouth. The sound was faint, but the Emperor's head snapped toward his child instantly. For a fraction of a moment, his cold mask cracked. His hand twitched, almost reaching for the baby. But the waitress had already patted the child's back, steadying his breathing. The Emperor's eyes returned to her. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating, and then he spoke again, softer this time, almost curious. "Why did you not fear death before touching him?" Her voice shook, but the words came from her heart. "Because he needed me. That was more important than the law." The crowd erupted in disbelief. Gasps, curses, angry murmurs filled the room. Some slammed their fists on the tables, calling her a fool. Others laughed cruelly, sure she would be killed in the next second. But the Emperor only stared at her longer. his golden eyes unreadable. For the first time in centuries, he felt something strange, something he could not name. This human, so fragile, so weak, had touched his heir without permission. And yet, instead of rage, a different fire burned in his chest. The guard still waited, trembling with the desire to strike her down. The nobles and travelers in the diner whispered and watched, hungry for blood. The waitress stood shaking, clutching the baby, waiting for the blade to fall. But the Dragon Emperor only leaned forward, resting his chin on one clawed hand, his gaze never leaving her face. And in a voice that made the walls tremble, he said, "Very well. We shall see if your courage is worth your life." The baby stirred, breathing faintly against her chest. The whole diner held its breath. Death had not come. Not yet, but everyone knew. Punishment always came. The night outside the diner was dark. Stars scattered like silver dust across the endless sky. Ships came and went from the docks, their engines humming. But inside the small human quarters above the diner, silence ruled. The waitress sat on the edge of her bed, her hands shaking. She could still feel the warmth of the baby dragon against her chest, hear its weak cries echoing in her ears. She was alive, at least for now. She had expected death the moment she touched the royal child. Yet the emperor had spared her, though his words still haunted her. "We shall see if your courage is worth your life." Why had he let her live? Why had he allowed her to comfort his child when the law demanded her blood? She didn't know. But something deep inside told her this was not the end. She was right. A heavy sound came from the shadows of her room. She froze. The air turned cold and the light above flickered. Slowly she lifted her eyes and her breath caught. The Dragon Emperor himself stood in the corner, wings folded, golden eyes glowing in the dark. He had come without guards, without noise, as if he had stepped straight from the night itself. Her throat went dry. "Your Majesty?" "Quiet," he said, his voice soft but sharp enough to cut. "Do you know why you are still alive?" She shook her head, her hands gripping the blanket. "Because you dared to touch my son." His eyes narrowed, burning brighter. "No one has ever done such a thing. Not even my highest generals. Not even his own caretakers. Yet you, a fragile human waitress, dared." Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to speak. He was crying. He couldn't breathe. "I didn't think, I just did what I had to." The Emperor studied her for a long moment. His face gave nothing away, but there was a strange weight in his gaze. Finally, he stepped closer, his long shadow falling over her. In his arms, wrapped in dark silk again, was the baby dragon. The child whimpered, a thin rasp in its chest. The Emperor looked down at his son, then back at the waitress. His voice dropped, quieter than before, almost like a confession. "He is weak." The waitress blinked. She had never thought she would hear the mighty Emperor admit such a thing. "He was born with lungs that cannot carry fire," the Emperor continued, his jaw tightening. "His chest is fragile, his breath shallow. He coughs when he should roar. Among my kind, such weakness is shame. A dragon who cannot breathe fire is no dragon at all. They whisper that he should be hidden or destroyed." The waitress gasped, pressing her hand to her mouth. "Destroyed? But he's just a baby." The Emperor's eyes turned sharp. "You speak as if my people are human. We are not. Among dragons, strength is law. The weak are left behind, even if they carry royal blood." The room fell into heavy silence. The baby whimpered again, clutching weakly at the silk. For a moment, the Emperor's hand trembled as he looked at his child. Then he covered it with cold strength, hiding the crack in his armor. The waitress's chest ached. She saw not a ruler, not a monster, but a father, standing at war with his own heart. "Why did you come here?" she asked softly. The Emperor's gaze pierced her. "To see if what you did was foolishness or truth. To see why my son calmed in your arms when he has rejected all others." She swallowed, then spoke from the only place she knew, her heart. "Because I didn't see a prince. I didn't see a future emperor. I only saw a child who needed love more than fear." The words hung in the air, fragile but sharp. For a long time, the Emperor said nothing. Then, to her shock, his lips curved, not into a smile, but into something strange. Something uncertain. "You humans," he muttered, almost to himself. "So weak, so small. And yet, you dare to speak to me like this?" She looked down at the baby, whose breathing rattled softly. "He doesn't need fire right now," she whispered. "He just needs to breathe. If his lungs were stronger, if he could breathe without pain, he might grow. He might live. The Emperor's head tilted, curiosity sparking in his golden eyes. You speak as though you have a solution. Her mind raced. Memories of Earth's hospitals, of tiny premature babies with tubes helping them breathe, filled her thoughts. She remembered her aunt, a nurse, explaining how fragile lives could be saved with machines. The words came out before she could stop them. Humans. We once built artificial lungs, machines to help weak babies breathe until they grew stronger. Maybe I could build something for him. The Emperor's wings shifted, his scales catching the dim light. His expression hardened again, but she caught the flicker beneath it. Hope, buried deep under centuries of pride. Artificial lungs, he repeated slowly, tasting the words. Then his voice grew sharp. Do you mean to tell me that you, a waitress, can do what the greatest healers of the Empire cannot? Her stomach tightened, but she nodded. I don't know if I can, but I will try. The Emperor's gaze burned into her, searching for weakness, for lies. But she did not look away. She had no power, no army, no wealth, only her heart and her stubborn courage. At last the Emperor stepped back. His cloak of shadows shifted as he turned toward the window. Very well. You will try. But know this, human, if you fail, your death will be quick. If you succeed— He paused, his golden eyes reflecting the faint glow of stars. If you succeed, you may change more than just his life. The baby stirred in his arms, coughing weakly. The Emperor looked down at his child, then back at her, his face unreadable. Without another word, he vanished into the night, leaving only the echo of his wings and the weight of his challenge behind. The waitress sat frozen, her heart racing. She had just promised the Dragon Emperor she could save his heir. But how could she, with nothing but scraps and human knowledge? Her eyes drifted to the window, where the stars shimmered like distant candles. She whispered to herself, I'll find a way. I have to. Because now it was not just her life at risk. It was the life of a fragile baby dragon, whose breath carried the future of an empire. The diner was almost empty when the waitress returned to work the next evening. Neon lights flickered outside, and the hum of alien voices floated in from the streets. She cleaned tables with tired hands, but her mind was far away. Every second, her thoughts returned to the Emperor's words. If you succeed, you may change more than just his life. She wanted to laugh. She was no doctor, no scientist. She was just a human girl serving food on the edge of nowhere. But deep inside, a fire had started burning. She could not forget the baby's weak chest rising and falling, his little claws clutching at her apron. That memory would not leave her alone, so she made a choice. She would try. When her shift ended, she slipped into the back of the diner where broken machines and scrap metal were piled high. Old parts from alien engines, broken processors, cooling tubes that no one wanted. To others, it was trash. To her, it looked like hope. She worked quietly, her hands clumsy at first. She remembered the stories her aunt used to tell her about Earth's hospitals, about fragile newborns saved by strange machines that breathed for them. She had no real blueprints, no proper tools. All she had were memories, scraps, and the stubborn belief that she couldn't let that baby die. Hours passed. Her fingers grew raw, her back ached, but she didn't stop. She bent tubes, cut wires, fused strange alien metals with human screws. Sparks flew. Twice she burned her hands. Once she nearly gave up. But then she thought of the baby's wheezing breath and her hands kept moving. She didn't notice when the air in the room shifted, colder and heavier. A shadow fell over the scattered parts. She turned and froze. The Dragon Emperor stood in the doorway. His golden eyes scanned the mess of wires and scrap, then landed on her. For a long moment he said nothing. The silence was thick, pressing against her chest. You work, he said at last, his voice low. The waitress swallowed hard. I'm trying. I don't have much, but maybe I can make something that helps him breathe easier. The Emperor stepped closer, his heavy presence filling the small room. His gaze moved across the table of parts, lingering on the half-formed device. Pathetic, he muttered. These scraps could not power a hatchling's toy. She flinched, shame burning her face. But then her chin lifted. Maybe, but it's all I have. And sometimes, scraps are enough. His eyes narrowed, studying her as if testing whether she truly believed her own words. You think human tricks can save my son when dragon healers have failed? She met his gaze. Her voice trembled, but it carried truth. Because human tricks saved mine. The Emperor tilted his head, curiosity flickering. She took a shaky breath. My brother was born too early. His lungs were too weak. Doctors said he might not survive. But they built a machine, artificial lungs, that kept him alive until he grew stronger. Without it, he would have died. The Emperor's expression did not change, but something in his golden eyes shifted. A crack in the mask. She looked down at the mess of wires and metal. I don't know if I can build something good enough for a dragon, but if I don't try, he'll never get the chance to grow. And if that happens, her voice faltered, you'll lose him. The room grew still. The Emperor's wings shifted slightly, their shadow stretching across the floor. He looked at her long and hard as if weighing her soul. Finally, he set the baby dragon down on the work table. The child whimpered, his chest rattling with each breath. The Emperor's voice was quiet but heavy. Do it. Try. But if he suffers because of you, no corner of the galaxy will hide you from my wrath. The waitress's hands trembled as she reached toward the baby. She touched his tiny scales gently, feeling the heat of his fragile body. She nodded. I'll need time. You have little, the Emperor said coldly. Each day he weakens. Each day his fire fades. The baby coughed and the waitress's chest tightened. She looked at the Emperor, then back at the child. Then I'll work day and night. The Emperor said nothing more. He lifted his son back into his arms and turned to leave. But just before the door closed, he paused. His voice was softer now, almost a whisper. Human. She froze. Yes? His eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. If you succeed, you will not only defy death, you will defy the law itself. Then he vanished into the shadows, leaving her alone with her scraps, her fear and her determination. The waitress sank into her chair, her heart pounding. The weight of what she had promised pressed on her chest like stone. She could fail. She could die. The galaxy could turn against her. But when she closed her eyes, she saw the baby dragon's weak breath. And that was enough to keep her going. She wiped her tears, pulled the metal closer, and whispered to herself, I'll build it. I'll save him. Somehow. And with that vow, she picked up her tools and began again, working through the night, as stars watched silently from the cold sky. The nights grew longer. The waitress no longer counted her shifts at the diner or the hours of sleep she lost. All she counted was the soft ticking of wires, the hiss of sparks, and the shallow breaths of the baby dragon echoing in her memory. Her small room above the diner had turned into a workshop of chaos. Broken alien processors lay scattered across the floor. Wires hung from the ceiling like vines. Metal scraps glowed faintly from failed welds. Every corner smelled of smoke and burnt copper. Her hands were covered in bandages, her arms marked with tiny burns. Yet still she worked. At first, everything she built collapsed. The tubes leaked. The pumps cracked. The circuits overheated. The little prototype sputtered like a dying lamp and fell apart in her hands. Each failure stabbed at her heart. Each time she thought of giving up. But then she remembered the baby's trembling claws, his chest struggling to rise and fall. And her hands, though shaking, began again. One night, as she tightened a metal frame around a cluster of glowing crystals, she felt a presence behind her. She turned quickly and nearly dropped her tools. The Dragon Emperor stood in the doorway again. His golden eyes swept across the chaos of the room, then fixed on her. In his arms lay the child. The baby's breaths were weaker than before, each one shallow and uneven. Her heart clenched. He's worse. The Emperor's face was carved from stone, but his silence was louder than any answer. He stepped closer, and for the first time she saw it. Not the mighty ruler, not the ruthless conqueror, but a father carrying a dying child. She set her tools down and leaned closer to the baby. His eyes were half-lidded, his chest barely moving. Panic burned in her throat. I need more time, please. The Emperor's gaze pierced her. Time is a luxury he does not have. Her hands shook as she reached for the half-built device. It looked crude, fragile, nothing like the sleek machines she remembered from Earth, but it was all she had. She held it up with trembling fingers. If I can finish this, if I can just get it to work, maybe he'll breathe easier. Maybe. The Emperor's wings shifted, his voice cold. If you fail, his death will be on your hands. I know, she whispered, tears burning in her eyes. But if I do nothing, he'll die anyway. So let me try. The Emperor's eyes lingered on her face, searching for lies, for weakness. At last he set the child down gently on the work table. The baby whimpered, coughing weakly. Then the Emperor stepped back, folding his arms. "Show me your human solution." Her pulse roared in her ears. She picked up her tools, fighting the tremor in her hands. The device still needed pieces: an airflow regulator, a stable power source, and tubing that could adjust to dragon lungs. She scrambled across the mess, pulling wires, bending pipes, welding connections. Sparks lit the room, casting frantic shadows across the walls. The Emperor stood silently, watching. He did not move. He did not speak. Yet his gaze weighed on her like a mountain. Her chest ached with every second. The baby coughed again, his tiny chest rattling like cracked glass. The sound nearly broke her. She whispered to herself, "Hold on, little one. Just hold on." Hours dragged by. Sweat dripped down her face, her arms aching. Her hands bled from small cuts. Still she worked, piecing scraps together like a desperate puzzle. Finally, as the first light of dawn touched the window, she held up the device. It was ugly. Rough edges, mismatched metals, wires sticking out. But inside, the crystals pulsed faintly, drawing power into the small pump. The tubes hissed softly, pushing air in and out. It was crude, but it worked. Her breath caught. She turned to the Emperor. "It's ready." He said nothing, but his eyes sharpened. Her hands trembled as she fitted the small mask over the baby's snout. The tubes connected, the crystals pulsed brighter, and the pump began to hum. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the baby's chest lifted, slowly, deeply, a stronger breath than before. Then another. Then another. His tiny wings twitched. A small spark of smoke puffed from his nose. The waitress's eyes filled with tears. "He's breathing." The Emperor's claws clenched at his side, his expression cracking for the briefest moment. His golden eyes flickered, not with rage, not with pride, but with something long buried. Hope. The baby let out a weak squeak, then nestled against the mask, drawing air with new strength. His chest no longer rattled. His breath came steady, though faint. The waitress sobbed with relief, her shoulders shaking. She wiped her face with dirty hands, laughing through her tears. "It works." "Oh, stars, it works," but the Emperor did not smile. His voice was deep, heavy with unspoken danger. "You have built a miracle, human. But miracles come with a price." She froze, looking up at him. "What do you mean?" "The law does not forgive," he said. His wings spread slightly, casting the room in shadow. "You touched royal blood. You defied sacred order. If the High Council learns of this, they will demand your death. Even saving him will not protect you." Her relief turned cold. She looked at the baby, breathing softly now, stronger than before. She looked at the Emperor, his face caught between pride and dread. She realized then she had not just saved a child. She had broken the law of an empire, and the true battle had only just begun. The device hummed softly in the dim room, its glow washing over the baby dragon's scales. The tubes pulsed with light as each breath passed through them. For the first time since his birth, the child's chest rose and fell with steady rhythm. No wheezing, no sharp coughs, just breathing. Pure, strong breathing. The waitress watched with wide eyes, her body trembling from exhaustion. Tears blurred her vision. She had done it. Against all odds, she had done it. The baby stirred, tiny claws stretching weakly before curling back. He let out a soft chirp, a sound almost like a laugh. Her heart swelled. He's alive. He's really alive. The Dragon Emperor stood silently beside her. His golden eyes, usually cold as fire-forged steel, now followed every small movement of his child. The faintest crack showed in his mask. His lips tightened. His claws trembled just slightly as the baby breathed stronger. It was not the pride of an emperor that shone in his eyes. It was the quiet relief of a father. But the silence did not last. A heavy knock thundered against the door below. Then another. Then the crash of armored boots. The waitress froze. The emperor's wings unfolded, his eyes narrowing. He knew that sound. So did she. The guards. From outside came the sharp voice of a dragon noble. By the order of the High Council, open this door. We have heard whispers of forbidden acts. The emperor's eyes flared. His voice was low and dangerous. They know. The waitress's stomach dropped. The law, she whispered. Royal blood touched by a commoner. An abomination, the voice thundered again. Surrender the human girl at once, or we will take her by force. The baby stirred at the noise, coughing softly. The waitress instinctively reached out, placing her hand on his back to calm him. The child quieted, leaning into her touch. The Emperor saw it. He saw his son find comfort not in him, not in his guards, but in this fragile human. His jaw clenched, his golden eyes burning with conflict. The law screamed at him to obey. His people demanded tradition. His empire demanded order. But his heart whispered something else. The door below shook as the guards forced their way in. The sound of metal against stone grew closer, the march of soldiers climbing step by step. The waitress looked at the Emperor, her face pale. "They'll kill me." His wings curled tighter around him. "Yes," he said, voice like thunder. Then softer, almost reluctant. "Unless I stop them." "Will you?" she asked, her voice breaking. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned his gaze to the baby. The child took another deep, steady breath through the device she had built. For the first time in his life, he breathed without pain. His tiny chest rose strong. A faint spark of flame flickered at the edge of his mouth. The Emperor's breath caught. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs. The door shuddered under a final blow. Then it burst open, and a group of armored nobles stormed inside, spears raised, eyes blazing with holy fury. "There!" one shouted. "The human. She must be executed." The guards moved forward, their weapons aimed at the waitress. She stumbled back, clutching the work table. The baby let out a soft cry, and without thinking, she scooped him up, holding him close. The room filled with gasps. A human girl holding the heir of the Dragon Emperor. A sight so forbidden, so impossible that even the nobles hesitated. The leader stepped forward, his voice sharp as a blade. "My Emperor, this is a crime beyond forgiveness. The law demands blood. Hand her over." The Emperor did not move. His golden eyes burned as he looked at the human girl cradling his son. The nobles waited, their spears shaking with the weight of tradition. The air was thick with judgment. Finally, the Emperor's wings spread wide, filling the room with shadows. His voice rolled like thunder, shaking the walls. "No!" The nobles froze. "My Emperor, she has given my son what none of you could. Breath, life, fire." His claws pointed toward the child, who nestled calmly in the waitress's arms, breathing strong. "You speak of law. I speak of life. And life will not be destroyed today." The nobles gasped, their faces twisting in shock. "You would defy the council? You would break tradition?" The Emperor's roar shook the air. "I am the Emperor. It is I who decide what lives and what dies. And I say this human lives." The baby stirred, a faint spark flickering from his mouth, his breath steady and strong. The sight silenced the room. For the first time they saw what the Emperor saw. Not a weak child doomed to die, but an heir reborn through human hands. The nobles stepped back, fear and disbelief written across their faces. They dared not challenge him, not when his wings filled the room, not when his voice carried such finality. The waitress stood frozen, her arms wrapped around the baby. She had been ready to die, ready to be torn apart. But now she realized she had been given something far more dangerous: protection, and with it, the wrath of an empire's law. The Emperor turned to her, his eyes burning like suns. "You have given me a forbidden gift, human, and now the galaxy itself will come for you." Her breath caught. She looked down at the baby in her arms, breathing peacefully, alive, then back at the Emperor who had just broken the oldest law of his kind. The forbidden gift was not just the device. It was her, and now nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. The chamber of judgment was lit by burning torches, their flames crackling against the stone walls. High above, banners of the dragon clans hung heavy, each marked with sharp symbols of pride and law. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and iron. Rows of nobles and warriors filled the hall, their eyes sharp, their voices low with whispers. At the center stood the Dragon Emperor, his black scales gleaming under the torchlight. His wings folded behind him like shadows carved from the night. Beside him stood the human waitress, small and fragile, clutching the baby dragon close. Her heart pounded so loud she thought everyone in the room could hear it. On the high platform, the council of elders sat like judges carved from stone. Their eyes were ancient, their voices like grinding rock. The leader, a dragon elder with silver scales and a voice that carried across the chamber, rose and pointed a claw at the girl. "This human has broken the most sacred law." She touched royal blood. She defied tradition. By our decree, her punishment is death." The nobles cheered their agreement, their voices echoing like thunder. Some hissed in disgust at the sight of the human holding the heir. Others laughed cruelly, eager to see her blood spill. The waitress hugged the baby tighter, tears stinging her eyes. The child's small chest rose and fell steadily, his breath stronger than it had ever been. He nestled against her, trusting her completely. She whispered softly, "Shh, it's okay," though her own voice trembled with fear. The emperor stepped forward, his golden eyes blazing. His voice thundered across the chamber. "Enough!" The hall fell silent. Even the flames seemed to shrink back. The emperor's wings unfolded, casting a shadow over the council. "This human has given my son life. Without her, he would be ash in the wind. Yet you demand her death?" His voice grew sharper. "Is this law or is this madness?" The elder bared his teeth. "Our laws are older than your throne, older than your bloodline. A ruler does not stand above them. If you protect her, you betray us all." The emperor's jaw tightened, but he did not look away. His claws curled against the stone floor, cracking it beneath his strength. "I am the emperor. My word is law." The crowd gasped. Shock rippled through the chamber. Never before had an emperor spoken against the council so openly. The silver-scaled elder hissed, his eyes blazing with fury. "If you choose this path, you risk war. You risk rebellion. You risk your empire." The emperor's wings spread wide, filling the hall like a storm. His roar shook the banners above. "Then let war come. Let rebellion rise. I will not kill the one who saved my son," the nobles shouted in chaos. Some roared in anger, demanding her execution. Others trembled, unsure what to believe. The hall shook with division, the walls echoing with voices of rage and fear. Through it all, the human stood still, clutching the baby close, her body trembling, but her arms strong. She did not speak. She did not beg. She simply held the child who breathed because of her. The emperor turned his gaze on her. For a moment his face softened and his voice lowered, meant only for her. "You gave him breath, and now you give me courage." Then he faced the council again, his roar crashing like thunder. "From this day forward, humans are under my protection. Harm one and you answer to me." The hall fell silent, stunned into stillness. The elder slammed his claw against the stone. "You cannot rewrite law with your pride." The emperor stepped closer, his shadow falling over the council. "Watch me." The golden fire in his eyes burned brighter than the torches, brighter than the banners, brighter than the doubt that filled the chamber. His choice was made. He had broken tradition, shattered the chains of law, and claimed a new truth. The baby dragon stirred in the human's arms. He opened his tiny mouth and for the first time let out a faint spark of flame. The hall gasped. The air was no longer weak. He lived, he breathed, he carried fire. The emperor's voice rang out, final and unshakable. "He lives because of her. Remember this moment, council. Remember who saved the future of our empire. It was not your laws. It was not your pride. It was a human." Silence followed. No one dared to speak. The waitress's knees felt weak, but the warmth of the baby in her arms kept her standing. She looked up at the emperor, fear and wonder in her eyes. She had expected to die. Instead, she had become something no human had ever been, protected by the most powerful ruler in the galaxy. The emperor spread his wings wide, his voice thundering like the roar of 1,000 storms. "A new law begins today, and it begins with her." The hall shook with the weight of his words. The waitress clutched the baby tighter, her heart racing. She knew the galaxy would not forgive this easily. Enemies would rise. Wars might come. But for now, the child in her arms was alive, and the emperor had chosen her side. And that choice would change the galaxy forever. The galaxy was no longer silent. News of the emperor's choice spread like fire across the stars. In every marketplace, in every palace, in every warship, the story was told. The dragon emperor had broken the ancient law. He had spared a human girl who touched his heir. He had declared her under his protection. Some called it madness. Others called it weakness, and some whispered it was the beginning of a new age. The waitress never imagined her life would become a storm. Only days ago she was serving food and cleaning tables. Now she walked through the emperor's palace halls with guards at her side and nobles glaring daggers at her from the shadows. She felt their hatred like a knife against her skin. They wanted her gone, dead, forgotten. But each time fear threatened to crush her, she looked at the baby dragon. He no longer wheezed. His chest rose strong, his tiny breath steady. Sometimes sparks of flame danced from his mouth, weak but real. And when he curled into her arms, she remembered why she had taken the risk in the first place. The Emperor was never far away. His golden eyes watched her closely, though his expression stayed unreadable. Sometimes he stood in silence as if still questioning his own choice. Other times she caught a flicker of something else, something softer, when his son rested calmly against her chest. But outside the palace walls, unrest grew. The Council of Elders spread their fury across the empire. They called the Emperor a traitor to his people. They whispered that a ruler who bent the law for a weakling child and a human girl was unfit to lead. They gathered armies in secret, ready to challenge his throne. One night, the Waitress awoke to the sound of distant roars. From the balcony, she saw the sky over the capital burning with the light of rebel ships. War drums echoed across the stars. She clutched the baby close, fear racing through her veins. "They're coming for me," she whispered. "Because of me." The Emperor stepped beside her, his wings unfolding as he gazed at the fire in the distance. His voice was calm but heavy. "No, they come because of me. You are only the spark. I am the flame." She turned to him, her voice trembling. "Then why not give them what they want? Why protect me when it could destroy everything?" He faced her, his golden eyes burning brighter than the fires outside. "Because without you, my son would be dead. And because you showed me something greater than law. You showed me love." The words stole her breath. For a moment, the mighty ruler of dragons did not look like a distant emperor. He looked like a father standing in the shadows of his own doubts, clinging to the only truth he trusted, his child's life. The baby stirred in her arms, letting out a small puff of smoke. The Emperor reached out, his clawed hand trembling before resting gently on his son's head. The moment was fragile, yet stronger than steel. But beyond the balcony, the sound of warships grew louder. The rebellion was not just coming, it was here. The Waitress looked at the Emperor, fear and resolve clashing in her heart. "What will you do?" His wings spread wide, his shadow covering her and the child. His voice thundered into the night. "I will do what I have always done. I will fight. But this time not for law, not for pride, for him." He looked at the baby, then at her. "And for the future you dared to give him." The room shook as distant blasts echoed across the city. The war had begun. The Waitress held the baby tighter, her voice a whisper drowned by the storm outside. "Then I'll stand with you, even if I'm only human." The Emperor's golden eyes met hers. For a heartbeat they softened. Then his roar split the night, a call to his armies, a promise to his enemies. The galaxy trembled. The Waitress knew the road ahead would be harder than anything she had faced. The council would not stop. The nobles would not forgive. The laws of old would not bend easily. But the child in her arms was alive. The Emperor had chosen defiance, and together they had already changed the future. The battle outside grew louder, flames rising against the stars. Yet in that small chamber, amidst fear and war, there was hope, fragile, forbidden, but alive. And hope once born cannot be killed.